What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we did get the numbers from Nintendo for their overall fiscal year and the quarter, so we know how many copies Animal Crossing has sold so far, and it's quite a few. We're going to talk about that today, and kind of the Switch as it moves forward and how many units it sold and where it sits currently, and even Nintendo's plans going forward, because while their sales have been good so far, they certainly have a tough road ahead of them based on what they've said to investors. We also have to go over a patent from Sony, once again seemingly for the PlayStation 5. It could actually end up being a good thing for people who have cards on their system that are concerned about like their kids or someone else buying stuff on their system. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're brand new here, hit the red subscribe button down below as we head towards 500,000 subscribers. And we're gonna start today with EA. Now, we had talked, of course, about how they mentioned to their investors during their own conference call that they were going to work out a way for people to upgrade to the next gen systems if they just buy like just straight up Madden right on the Xbox One. It'll just go forward to the Series X, but there are some restrictions. Now, I think EA is looking at this as like, hey, we have to deal with this for like 1, maybe 2 years at the most, and then the Xbox One and the PS4 will pretty much become legacy and just outdated and no one will develop for them anymore. But we can see this here from Wario64, who did go through some of the fine print, saying that it seems that Madden NFL 21 is not actually supporting smart delivery, but an offer with some restrictions where you purchase the game by December 31st and upgrade to Xbox Series X by March 31st. Yes, this isn't surprising. This is why a lot of us were like looking at EA like, really? Or just, it's going to be that easy? No, they want there to be a time limit on this because of course they want it to eventually run out so that they don't have to deal with this stuff that's in their terms of service like 3 years from now. Even the following year, they don't want to deal with that, right? Eventually that clock will run out and you have to buy the Xbox Series X version, although like I guess you look at that and you say, well, I would just buy the new Madden, although in March there's going to be 4 or 5 months where you just have to buy that new copy of Madden straight up if you get a Series X. But yeah, EA, of course, there's some fine print that comes with that. Also, if you had backed the Wonderful 101 Kickstarter, codes started going out for you to redeem at the store that you chose, or if you're like me and you chose a physical copy, you probably got a Steam code, and that's fine. I'll check it out on Steam. Eventually, I'll get the physical copy for the Switch. I can wait on that, I guess. And I'm going to check it out probably before the podcast. So I'll check it out some today and a little bit tomorrow as well, because I have not played the Wonderful 101 at all. And I'm interested to go back and check it out because there have been some improvements and enhancements made of here, of course. And I'll be playing it on a PC that has a 2070 Super in it. So I should get pretty good visuals, good resolution, frame rate, and all of that. But I am very curious to see what changes they've made and how it plays in 2020. Oh, and we did have another event canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is Tokyo Game Show. This was supposed to be going on in September, but it appears that they sent out emails to press and other media outlets to let them know that it had been canceled. It will become a digital-only event. Several people started tweeting out about it. I saw here, for example, from Dr. Sirkin Toto, says Tokyo Game Show in September 2020 just got canceled as a physical event. It was inevitable, and they show the email there that talks about how it's been canceled, taking place physically, but they will be holding it online, which of course means that most of us will still see Tokyo Game Show as we usually do, where there are just straight up announcements and then we kind of watch it through a stream. I mean, it depends, I guess, on how they set this up. If it's going to be just a bunch of companies sending video in for like their announcements, like Capcom will do stuff there. Of course, Sony should, I think, do something since they're going to be on the run up to the PS5, and probably some stuff from Nintendo as well. And then any other companies like Bandai Namco will also be there, we believe. It's kind of scattered. Again, the situation this year is very strange, and hopefully next year we can get back to normal with a lot of this stuff. But yeah, pretty much throughout this year, any event that was supposed to be taking place will probably become a digital event. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're gonna start with Nintendo's sales right away. That, of course, covers this past fiscal year that just ended March 31st. So we got roughly 11 days of Animal Crossing in, and we're going to go over the big number that they turned in for only 11 days, but then Nintendo also gave us a more up-to-date number that's closer to like today. So we're gonna go over that as well. But let's, I guess, start with the overall performance of the Switch hardware itself. You can see here, VentureBeat had a pretty big write-up for it. I'll link that down below if you want to go through the numbers yourself. And then we also have a page that Nintendo keeps up to date. Pretty much every time they go to present to investors, they update the page with some of their top titles that we'll also go over, and of course, their hardware numbers. Now, in terms of revenue, just a very broad number here, they actually did $12.31 billion. That's up 9% from the previous year at $11.3 billion, which that's good. Grew 9%. They make a ton of money. Good news there. Now, if we go over to the hardware units itself, that's something that a lot of people were curious. How did the Switch do? Because naturally it had some struggles with just overall supply versus how many people wanted it with the demand. Well, it looks like in this past quarter, they sold 3.29 million units. The split was the regular Switch at 2.27, and then the Switch Lite right around 1 or so million with a margin of error, but it did come out to 3.29 million, which brought the overall total of this past fiscal year to 21 million units. That is like, we're talking like Wii numbers here for that, right? And that does bring the overall total of the Switch, as you can see here, to 55.77 million, which means that if you take the GameCube and the Nintendo 64, add them together, those are the lifetime sales of those, by the way, the Switch has still sold more overall. What's also very impressive is the software number, and they do put it right next to that 3DS, by the way, and the 3DS has been on a very quick downward decline here, we'll say. They've been dropping off a rock with some of these 3DS sales, but I mean, they still probably make pretty good money on them, so they figure, hey, we'll keep selling them until everyone just stops buying them. But if you look at the software number, 356.24 million units versus 383.11 million units, it's pretty obvious that just overall more people are buying more games per Switch than the 3DS. That is really, really good, though, that they're able to move more software per unit for the Switch than they were for the 3DS. Now we're going to jump over to the top-selling games that Nintendo put out for us. They basically tell us, hey, these are like the top 10 or something that we've sold, and it's pretty ridiculous if you really look at them as we go down here. Let's start at the top. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 24.77 million. That is ridiculous. That should be more than the DS version, by the way. That's crazy. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is right below that, 18.84 million units. That just shows you how popular Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is. In fact, if you take a look at this past quarter, of course, Animal Crossing sold more because it launched and was obviously all over the internet. The game right below Animal Crossing, though, in this past quarter, selling just under 2 million units, was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It's insane. Breath of the Wild, 17.41 million. That is tied with Mario Odyssey. Zelda and Mario are not usually tied like this. That is extremely impressive. And then keep in mind, we also have the Wii U version of Breath of the Wild taken into account. So technically, Breath of the Wild, as just an overall title, has sold more than Mario Odyssey. That is big time for the Zelda brand. And then below that, we have Pokemon Sword and Shield, 17.37 million. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, 11.97 million. Animal Crossing New Horizons, in 11 days, 11.77 million. They did give us an updated number, though. 13.4 million units, roughly, is how many they have managed to ship already. That is crazy. Below that, Splatoon 2 is now a 10 million unit seller, 10.13 million units. That's very good. Mario Party, 10.10 million pieces. I'm just going to skip past that because for some reason Nintendo has a 10 million unit seller on their hands that they will not update. I don't get it. And then right below that, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe at 6.6 million. So if you look down that list, you may notice that everything on there, minus the last game, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, has sold over 10 million units. In fact, we're probably going to get to a point where we have multiple games that have sold over 20 million units. That is ridiculous. We just talked about how many pieces of software per system we're selling if you compare it to the 3DS. And this shows right here what kind of effect that has, where just people are picking up the Switch and they're picking up Mario Kart, right, 8 Deluxe, they're picking up Breath of the Wild or a Mario Odyssey alongside of Animal Crossing. Basically, Nintendo's new games that come out, like an Animal Crossing, seem to also fuel sales for their evergreen titles, as people just pick up those games alongside of something like an Animal Crossing. And I don't think it's going to slow down much, but we are going to have a bit of an issue going forward through this year, as Nintendo themselves did have to kind of forecast a dip in sales overall, whether it's hardware, software, pretty much across the board, even going as far as to raise their dividend to investors, which generally means they're even expecting I don't want to say sizable decline, but a noticeable decline, certainly. And of course, with just the situation right now in the world with the virus, it makes sense that they would expect that and be more conservative with their forecast. That way, if they do better, it's obviously beating expectations rather than coming in below them. Now, I also want to go over to the investors Q&A that they did, because there was one really big piece of information outside of the online numbers, like, so how many people have signed up for their online service has eclipsed 15 million, which is big. They say Animal Crossing and Pokemon, of course, contribute to that. But something really, really big here that they mentioned is that they are like at the midway point, barely, for the Switch, meaning that this system could end up being a 7-year system. Is that possible? Yeah, I mean, it probably is, because this is a family of systems. That's the biggest thing that I think we really have to wrap our minds around. The current Switch as it is now may not be the Switch that, of course, ends this generation. We could have a quote-unquote new 3DS-like Switch that has some improvements to, I guess, keep up with current times somewhat, but eventually we will get that big Switch 2 system. Now, of course, I just mentioned their forecast kind of was dipped a bit, and they did go over with investors that they were having some issues with remote work. In fact, they showed us this slide here, and yeah, that is apparently what they are showing for what's coming up. And the fact that they have to have Animal Crossing releasing continuous updates as one of those, that's not great. Yeah, so, I mean, here's the deal with this. Nintendo, of course, could put out a tweet a week or two from now, right? That's like, hey, that Mario remaster that was rumored, it's happening, it's coming this holiday. All of a sudden, people are really excited. But the fact that things like Bayonetta 3, Metroid Prime 4, and Breath of the Wild 2 are all still to be announced, TBA, in their little pamphlet they give out to investors with future games and release dates, not great. The fact they're not even putting a year on them, yeah, that's concerning. I was really hoping Bayonetta 3 would at least come out this year, but right now, with how uncertain everything looks, I don't know if I'd put money on it. Next up, let's talk about a patent that appears to be at least in planning or thought of for the PlayStation 5. It seems Sony plays around with a lot of patents, but it's pretty interesting to look at them nonetheless. And of course, we hear that the DualSense controller still has some secrets, we'll say, hiding ready for a reveal from Sony that we think is in the next couple of weeks. I mean, we're about to get into June. Like, eventually you gotta show the system, the games, any extra features you have for a surprise. And one of them may be a fingerprint sensor for the PlayStation 5 through that DualSense controller. It's an interesting idea, but it's not really new. Now, the patent, of course, is just that. It is a patent, it's not confirmed, but it's very possible this could be something that they have thought of, as of course it would add extra security for things like purchases through microtransactions, because how many stories do we hear about parents who, of course, own a game system and then also let their kids play on it, and the kids just happen to either have the right password or something else, right? If you can have a fingerprint sensor on like the front where that touchpad is, or maybe on the side of it or on the back or something, and you can have it, of course, just check your fingerprint and then allow you to buy games, that would be, I think, pretty cool. Now, phones already do this. Like, it's not necessarily new for like phones or technology or anything like that. In fact, a lot of us probably use that to sign into our phones, but the idea of including that on a game system as kind of added protection, I think is a good idea. People, again, are concerned about things like privacy, but I just said most of us probably use it on our phone, and I'm sure there's probably a way to turn it off anyway and just use a regular password, but I think it's a pretty cool idea. Again, though, just a patent, but we need to see this PlayStation 5 already, don't we? And in our last bit of news, let's talk about something, I guess, a little bit more tangible about next gen, and that is actual news around a next generation title, and that is Dirt 5. We, of course, had that revealed yesterday during that Xbox Series X gameplay event, but we had some interviews, we'll say, with developers for Dirt 5, and they mentioned that there will be a mode that will allow not only 60 frames per second, but up to 120 frames per second. Now, they said the 60 frames per second mode would be 4K. And then they didn't really mention resolution for the 120 frames per second. My guess is the resolution will drop, probably be more of a checkerboard type thing where they just upscale it to 4K and then you have access to much higher frame rates in 120. I mean, that's good for driving games as most people will opt for the higher frame rate so you have a more responsive overall control of your car. And you probably won't be noticing checkerboarding going on like the side when you're flying past something at like 130, 140 miles per hour. And you're certainly not going to be like looking at the side of the car next to you trying to check out all these little details and stuff. So I think it's good to have that option. Absolutely. And the fact that a third party is doing that, it gets me really excited for something like what will Forza 8 be with this Series X, because I have this feeling they will incorporate higher frame rates. And now that we've heard about it, also makes me wonder about the other side with the PlayStation 5 and if they'll try something like that with Gran Turismo. I feel like the PlayStation 5 will probably have a Gran Turismo around launch to be right up against Forza 8 on the Series X side for launch. But yeah, high frame rate for racing games seems like a pretty good reality going forward into the next generation. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This one is from Artur saying, honestly, I got so lazy about open world games. I'd really appreciate a more streamlined experience in the Prince of Persia setting. I agree. And I hope that Ubisoft kind of looked at what they were putting out and a lot of Ubisoft games were like these big open world games that felt like they had more to do than should be there. Like it feels like they just artificially put a lot of stuff in there to make the game feel larger, make you feel like you have to do a lot more than is really necessary to beat the game or even 100% it. Like people were talking about before that they spent nearly 300 hours 100%ing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that's just because they just had all these kind of tedious quests thrown in there just to be there. Ubisoft, I think, fell in love with that formula because it really makes it look like their games are a lot larger than they are. And of course, they can usually put in microtransactions in those settings with games where they'll introduce other currencies and basically try to make a single player game into a live service game. And sometimes it's good just to get a game like that's more streamlined, straightforward, 15, 20-hour style game like in a Prince of Persia setting, I think would be a good change of pace. They could still have these big open world style games that they like so much, but honestly, sometimes it's good to have some variety and change it up. And I think Prince of Persia would really help to shake things up if they tried it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed these video, guys, hit that like button, it really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's Nintendo's sales. Are you impressed? Obviously, by Animal Crossing having about 13.5 million copies already selling, by the way. I think that number was as of like a week or so ago. It's ridiculous, right, to see those kind of sales, but it's Animal Crossing. It's very, very popular. Also, we keep hearing about resolution for this generation. Are you happy to hear that all of a sudden frame rate is starting to come up more and more? 60 frames apparently being the normal target, and even 120 frames per second modes being an actual thing. Let me know about that as well. Guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.